What would happen if an alien was captured by humans? Would it be peaceful coexistence or interrogation for extraterrestrial technology? The military first transported 3 huge steel plates, 100 meters high, to trap the alien in a container. Then, it was transported through an underground tunnel to a secret research base. They originally planned to disassemble it with a diamond drill. But they found that things had gone far beyond human imagination. The drill cracked as soon as the machine started operating. Maintenance personnel entered the research room, but when she removed the drill and magnified it tens of thousands of times, she found it covered with nanobots. They were reproducing at an astonishing rate and gnawing on the drill. They consumed it completely within a few minutes. In a panic, the maintenance worker prepared to turn around and leave, but was stopped by the officer outside, because everyone noticed that his sleeve had been corroded. Despite the maintenance worker's pleadings, the officer still ordered that the door must not be opened. The consequences would be unimaginable if the nanobots were released. Amid the maintenance worker's cries for help, the officer ordered the activation of a new drill to continue working. Moments later, the maintenance worker died. However, the terrifying things were far from over. Everyone found that the steel hoops binding the giant were being rapidly corroded. Cracks also appeared in the bulletproof glass. The officer realized the seriousness of the problem. He immediately pressed the incineration button to destroy the giant. The giant remained unharmed, under the burning of thousands of degrees of high temperature. After glancing at everyone, it raised its hands, and transformed into countless nanobots flying into the air. The officer was so frightened that he tried to escape, but at this moment, the laboratory was completely sealed off. In a state of fear, everyone could only watch as the glass was corroded. At that time, the armored troops outside were on high alert. The steel door was knocked into the air tens of meters under the impact of the nanobots. The armored troops launched a fierce attack, trying to completely eliminate the nanobots that had invaded Earth. However, human weapons couldn't cause any damage. The shells were corroded by the nanobots the moment they hit. In the end, even the soldiers were devoured without a trace of bone left. The Secretary of Defense looked at the black fog on the satellite map, and the skyscrapers being gnawed. He realized that the alien giant wanted to destroy all of humanity, and there was only one person in the world who could save the Earth and resolve this crisis. He was Klaatu, the envoy sent by the alien civilization, but his purpose in coming here wasn't to protect humans. It was to save wild animals while exterminating humans. In 1928, a glowing sphere suddenly landed on the snow-capped mountains of India. It was discovered by a mountaineer who was exploring. He slowly stretched out his hand. He saw the bright light emanating from inside the sphere, and gently tapped it with his ice axe. After chiseling open the outer shell, he found a flowing galaxy inside, but before he could react, the sphere suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Then the man fainted. When he woke up again, he found that the sphere had disappeared, and a strange mark had appeared on the back of his hand. Klaatu, the alien hidden inside the sphere, obtained the mountaineer DNA. 80 years later, NASA discovered an unknown light sphere in outer space, flying towards Earth at a speed of 30,000 kilometers per second. At this speed, it would directly hit Manhattan, USA in 78 minutes. It would be impossible to evacuate the 8 million residents in the area in such a short time. So NASA set up a disaster emergency team. Someone suggested using missiles to intercept it. The person in charge stated that considering the target speed, the probability of a successful missile interception was extremely low, so the only thing they could do for now was to prepare for post-disaster work as much as possible. But just as scientists were staring at the countdown, thinking the light sphere was about to hit Earth, the unknown sphere suddenly slowed down, and slowly landed on an empty square. The onlookers at the scene were all knocked flying. Moments later, the disaster emergency team arrived at the scene. They were composed of top experts from various fields. At this time, the scene was surrounded by a thick fog. The surrounding radiation levels also increased. As the experts continued to move forward, the thick fog surrounding the glowing sphere gradually dispersed. Everyone finally got a clear view of this behemoth. The military also arrived upon hearing the news. The soldiers quickly set up heavy weapons. They surrounded this unknown alien sphere. They didn't know what it was, so they had to be ready for battle at any time. At this moment, the sphere suddenly emitted a burst of strong light. Amid everyone's puzzled gazes, a humanoid creature slowly emerged. The military commander ordered everyone to take their positions. Everyone was too scared to make a move. Only biologist Helen was different from the others. It was as if something was drawing her to approach slowly. Just as she was about to touch the alien, someone's gun accidentally went off and hit the alien. Amid shouts of "ceasefire," he fell into Helen's arms. The future fate of humanity would be entirely in the hands of this alien. He was Klaatu, whom we mentioned earlier. However, as Helen was calling for a doctor, the light sphere emitted another burst of strong light. Before everyone could react, a 100-meter-tall giant had appeared in front of them. Then all the high-tech equipment around malfunctioned. Then the giant's eyes lit up. A piercing sound wave instantly knocked humans to the ground. He strode towards the crowd. Helen thought he was going to attack. At the critical moment, Klaatu issued an order. The red light in the giant's eyes disappeared instantly. The surroundings gradually returned to normal. The reason Klaatu stopped the giant from further actions was because they had a more important goal. Then everyone rushed Klaatu to the hospital. But at this moment, his heart suddenly stopped beating. The doctor had to first use human first aid methods to perform defibrillation, but unexpectedly, the instrument short-circuited as soon as it touched him. Fortunately, his heart rate temporarily returned to normal. Just as everyone was unsure of what to do next, Helen suggested that the surgeon first remove the bullet, but since they didn't know how the alien would react to anesthesia, the doctor decided to first administer local anesthesia. As the scalpel gradually cut through the skin, the doctor found that the flesh was grayish-white. The texture was like whale blubber. They sent the sample to the laboratory for DNA testing, but at this moment, the doctor suddenly noticed that the alien's outer muscle tissue was gradually cracking at a speed visible to the naked eye. What was even more shocking was that new muscles and bones were gradually emerging inside. The doctor hurriedly took out the bullet. Then he started to clean up the shed gray flesh from the outer layer, and everyone was even more stunned by the next scene. The alien, with its outer layer completely shed, had a body shape exactly the same as a human's. As the DNA test results came out, they were surprised to find that it contained 3 life forms in its body. It is currently known that apart from the brain, which is different from humans, all other body tissues are derived from humans, and the outer tissue wrapping him is an organic material. It is like a spacesuit made using some kind of biotechnology, just like a human placenta. This indicates that he must have come to Earth before and obtained DNA samples from humans. What is even more unexpected is that in just 6 hours so far, he has transformed into the appearance of a middle-aged human man. After learning the news, the Secretary of Defense immediately came to the laboratory to communicate with the scientists, and planned to meet this alien creature in person. During the process, she found that the other party could speak human language. The Secretary of Defense took the opportunity to ask about his purpose in coming to Earth, but the other party didn't answer the question directly. He only said that his name was Klaatu, and that he was a representative of multiple civilized worlds. As for why he came to Earth, Klaatu said that these questions he would only explain to the leaders of various countries in the world directly. In other words, the U.S. Secretary of Defense wasn't qualified. Regarding Klaatu's non-cooperation, the Secretary of Defense planned to inject him with a sedative, to transfer him to a safe place for further interrogation, because she believed that when 2 different civilizations meet, the relatively weaker one is either destroyed or enslaved. Obviously, Earth is the weaker party now, but the scientists firmly disagreed with this. After all, this is the most important discovery in human history. Seeing that the Secretary of Defense was determined, Helen then offered to administer the sedative herself. But no one expected that when she was getting the medicine, she secretly replaced the sedative with normal saline, and took the opportunity to remind him to escape quickly. But Klaatu had no intention of escaping. Instead, he let several agents take him to the interrogation room. They connected a lie detector to Klaatu, planning to test whether what he had said earlier was true. However, they still thought the problem too simply, for questions that Klaatu didn't want to answer. He directly emitted brainwaves to control the computer. The interrogator reached out to adjust it, but Unexpectedly, he fell to the ground convulsing like an electric shock. Then he slowly sat up and answered Klaatu's questions. It was obvious that he had been controlled by the other party. After learning the layout of the base from the interrogator, Klaatu also obtained the monitoring images of the entire base. Through the wires connected to his body, he suddenly closed his eyes. The guards patrolling in the corridor fell to the ground instantly. Alarms also sounded in the laboratory. And the lights flickered on and off. At this moment, Klaatu had put on the interrogator's clothes and left via the elevator. After learning the news, the Secretary of Defense immediately announced that all departments' armed forces should enter a state of high alert, mobilize all surveillance satellites and drone equipment. They are determined to capture the escaped alien. At this time, Klaatu has arrived at Manhattan Railway Station. He simply moved his hand and easily took out the bread from the vending machine. At that time, there were many people in the station. Everyone was fleeing the city where the light sphere had landed. Regarding the sudden visit of the alien light sphere to Earth, people thought it might be a sign of the coming doomsday. Later, Klaatu came to the bathroom and found that the gunshot wound on his body had not yet healed, probably because he exerted too much strength at the base earlier. He fainted in the bathroom. After waking up, he asked someone to help contact Helen. Helen hung up the phone and rushed over immediately. Under the guidance of the staff, Helen found Klaatu and took him away at risk. After getting in the car, Klaatu took back the trauma medicine that Helen had picked up from her. Then he applied it to the injured area on his chest. In just a few seconds, the wound healed completely. Later, he took Helen to a McDonald's. He met a 70-year-old old friend here. The other party is a long-term Earth commissioner. He has been secretly observing human actions. He believes that humans' destruction of the ecosystem shows a serious tendency of destruction and self-destruction. These phenomena are all reflected in other species, such as the greenhouse effect, animal extinction, and so on. The most tragic thing is that humans clearly know the consequences, yet they don't know what to do. Upon hearing the commissioner's evaluation of humans, Klaatu immediately decided to activate the human elimination program, and asked the commissioner when he would leave Earth. Unexpectedly, the other party said that he had lived here for 70 years, and couldn't let go of his feelings for his family, so he planned to stay and perish with humans. Although he didn't understand what kind of feelings that was, Klaatu didn't force him. At the same time, the military is still dealing with the alien giant. Faced with the threat, they dispatched the most advanced drones, planning to destroy the giant with missiles. The launch was intercepted by the other party in an instant. What's even more terrifying is that the drones have been controlled by the giant. This scene left everyone in the command room stunned. The commander halted the operation. Seeing that high-tech couldn't be of use, the commander ordered 3 huge steel plates to be brought in. Thus, the scene at the beginning unfolded. After Klaatu left McDonald's, he asked Helen to drive him to a suburban forest. After he got off the car, Helen was worried, so she quietly followed behind. Klaatu stood by the river. The river water in front of him kept churning and bubbling. A small light sphere slowly emerged from the water. Under the glare of strong light, various creatures around flocked towards the light sphere. Helen was extremely shocked by this scene. She didn't know if helping Klaatu was right or wrong. After she turned around and left, Klaatu placed his hand on the light sphere again. Miraculously, all the light spheres around the Earth seemed to sense the energy at this moment. They all began to collect various animal species. Then all the light spheres rose into the air, transporting animals from all over the world to outer space. In other words, only humans remain on Earth now. Watching the orbs evacuate Earth collectively, everyone thought the crisis was finally over. But Helen, who witnessed the process, thought it wasn't that simple. She kept pressing Klaatu for the reason. He didn't continue to hide it. He said he came to save the Earth. If the Earth is destroyed, humans will also die. But if humans perish, the Earth will be reborn. So they will never, because of a single species, let the Earth, which has nurtured countless lives, head towards destruction, and the nanobots released by the giant are the way to eliminate all humans. Moreover, the destruction program has already started. Even if Klaatu is arrested or even killed, the program will not stop because of it. Just as Helen was begging him to show mercy, a passing police car spotted them, and confirmed that they were the reported alien fugitives. The police officer got out of the car, and told the two not to make any sudden moves. As soon as the words were spoken, Klaatu controlled the car to hit and kill the police officer, unexpectedly. He then used superpowers to revive him. This move confused Helen, but she speculated that since Klaatu could resurrect people, he must also have the ability to stop all this. Then Helen took Klaatu to the home of a biologist named Carl. As soon as he entered, Klaatu noticed the unsolved equation on the blackboard by Carl, so he erased the original process, and began to write his own problem-solving ideas. Just as he solved this difficult problem, inspired by him, Carl also successfully cracked it and marveled at the incredibility of it all. After learning about Klaatu's identity and intentions, Carl admitted that they must have some kind of technology that can solve the current problems faced by humans, but Klaatu clearly pointed out that humanity's problem isn't about technology, but about the lack of willingness to change themselves. He also mentioned that every civilization will eventually face a crisis. Carl thus thought of humanity's current situation. Perhaps humans, who are on the verge of destruction at this moment, are at a moment to change their will and achieve evolution. He hoped that Klaatu wouldn't take away the opportunity that belongs to humans. It was obvious that the conversation couldn't continue here. This is inherently a problem with no fixed answer. Different positions naturally lead to different judgment criteria. At this moment, 3 helicopters roared in. To avoid implicating the biologist, Helen quickly left with her son Jacob, but by then, the helicopters were already overhead. Klaatu suggested running deep into the woods. At this moment, Jacob suddenly shouted into the air that Klaatu was down there. It turned out that while watching TV at Carl's house just now, Jacob saw that Klaatu was a wanted fugitive, so he secretly called the police and provided the location. Before Helen could explain to her son, the agents on the plane suddenly abducted Helen, and prepared to return to the base. The remaining 2 helicopters aimed at Klaatu, ready to open fire to eliminate him. At this moment, Klaatu stretched out his hands and took control of the planes. Jacob was so scared that he ran away. In the chaos, he almost stepped on the wooden bridge and fell into the river. Fortunately, Klaatu reached out and pulled him in time. Thinking of his mother's previous protection of him, Jacob realized that the other party didn't want to hurt him, so he asked Klaatu to send him home. After Helen was captured, she proposed peace talks with the aliens to the Secretary of Defense, but the other party confidently believed that they were in control of the situation. The aliens would leave Earth soon. Soon the secretary brought news. Nanobots had begun to fly around the world, devouring everything at an unimaginable speed. Wherever the swarm passed, it became scorched earth. Cities were gradually falling into the shadow of doomsday. Humanity was facing the crisis of being erased by alien technology. Faced with the threat, the Secretary of State was finally afraid. She found Helen again. She could only hope that she would persuade Klaatu to terminate the plan. At this moment, there was little time left for humanity. With Klaatu's help, Jacob reconnected with Helen. After the 2 sides agreed on a meeting place, Jacob took him to his father's grave. He thought Klaatu had the ability to resurrect the police. He must also be able to resurrect his deceased father. But the answer was a shake of the head and a sigh. Klaatu said he couldn't do everything. To appease Jacob's lost emotions, he said there was no true extinction in the universe. It's just a transformation of existence. The human body is only a temporary residence of the soul. This answer made the boy even more devastated. He understood that his father would never come back. At this moment, Helen hurried over and held Jacob tightly in her arms. This touching scene deeply touched Klaatu. He understood that humans were not just selfish. Perhaps it was the complex emotions among them that gave him a new understanding of this species. At this moment, nanobots were still invading in all directions. Helen begged Klaatu to spare humanity, but to shut down the destruction program, it must go through the largest light sphere in the central square. As for whether it can succeed, Klaatu said he could only try his best. Then they quickly drove to the square. Strangely enough, it was originally full of soldiers. There wasn't a single person in sight at the moment. Helen noticed something was wrong, and asked her colleague to stop immediately, but it was already too late. It turned out that the military had long laid a tight net here, although the Secretary of Defense had tried to persuade the president, but the latter ultimately didn't adopt the suggestion. After the explosion, colleague Mike's life or death was unknown. The three people in the back all suffered minor injuries. What's worse, the nanobots had already rushed towards them. Klaatu immediately took the two of them out of the car, hiding under a nearby bridge hole, but by this time, the swarm had reached a level that blocked the sky and the sun. Klaatu couldn't hold on much longer. What was even more desperate was that Jacob suddenly started nosebleeding and fainted. It was obvious that his body had been invaded by nanobots. Then Helen also started to react. Faced with Helen's plea, Klaatu tightly held the hands of the two, drawing all the nanobots into his own body. At this moment, he remembered what biologist Carl had said. Humans always make changes only at the moment of life and death. Finally, he turned around and walked towards the swarm, striving to reach the light sphere, reaching out to terminate the order to destroy humanity, and Klaatu's body dissipated along with it. The huge energy emitted by the light sphere caused the nanobots to instantly lose their ability to move and fall to the ground. At the same time, the global power system also stopped operating, along with the energy released by the light sphere. It was as if the world had frozen at this moment. This was precisely the punishment of alien civilization on humanity. At the end of the movie, the light sphere slowly rose into the air under the gaze of the mother and son, leaving behind an Earth that was devastated but still had vitality. It's hard to say who won this alien trial. The nanobots have never eaten only steel and buildings, but also the arrogance and short-sightedness in human civilization. In Klaatu's eyes before leaving, there was a more complex emotion than destruction or salvation. It was the final compromise to the contradictions of humanity. Finally, the world fell into darkness, but it made people see something clearly instead. Perhaps alien civilizations never intended to exterminate anyone, just using an extreme sense of fear, forcing us to re-examine our relationship with the Earth. Are we the masters of the planet or passers-by? Should we continue to write history with the desire to conquer, or learn to find the future in coexistence? Interested friends can watch the original film, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Thanks for watching.